Today's episode, Josh and I are going to cover Steph Curry's historical month of April so far, as well as the Spurs getting fined $25,000 and the Raptors for sitting players, and then Luka and Mark Cuban's backlash or comments in regards to the play-in tournament, and everyone's, of course, ever so loving segment, Josh's turn at trivia. Next. Welcome back to the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Josh, who couldn't find his mute button.
And welcome back to today's episode. I am going to start and open it up like I mentioned at the top before the lovely music that we've been playing. Shout out to Lakey Inspired for the music. Steph Curry's historical April month so far. I'm going to highlight a few stats. Josh and I are going to talk about it, maybe debate some things depending on how it goes, and we'll roll right through. So Steph right now has played 49 games. This is obviously in case Josh, for some reason, even though he's the stat person out of the two of us, has not heard this yet, but he has played 49 games, averaged 31, 5.6 rebounds, and 5.9 assists. I think that's very important because the fact that he's not averaging that many assists right now is intriguing to me. And I think it's because his teammates are not hitting shots. I digress. 49% from the field, 42% from three, and 92%, from the free throw line. Intriguing that he is only 1% away from 50, 40, 90. He is currently with a 26.7 PER, and he has 7.2 win shares. He's dominating in every sense of the term. However, here is the caveat to how April has been. Eliminate everything I just said for the last minute. In 9 games in April so far, he missed the second game of the month against the Raptors, which, by the way, they proceeded to lose by 53. We never talked about it, but he sat and they lost by 53. He has scored 359 points in April, which has equated for a 39.9 point per game average. Mind-boggling, quite literally. 47% from three. I did note free throw attempts for a reason. He's shooting 8.4 free throw attempts a game, which is above his career average. And here's the most astonishing stat to me, or two of them. 4.3 assists per game, 6.5 rebounds per game. And he's currently plus 49, plus minus, in the month of April. Josh, is Steph in the MVP conversation?
Well, if he's not, I don't know what gets you into the MVP conversation. I think everyone is finally remembering that Stephen Curry is one of the best players in the NBA and one of the best basketball players ever. It seems to be something that we forgot over the past few years. Everybody seemed to think wasn't true anymore when Kevin Durant went to Golden State. And Stephen Curry is reminding everyone by putting on a scoring clinic better than the things James Harden did a couple years ago in Houston. Oh, and he hit a hook shot 3 in a game while being fouled. That's absurd.
Best damn whatever.
That is a horse shot. You do that during horse to win. He did it in a game, in a close game, and he made it.
Has he done a tunnel shot in a while since there's no fans in the stands? I feel like that's like the next best thing other than the fact that he just hit that for the best 4-point play possible.
I want to say I think he does the tunnel shot just as part of his warm-ups.
Okay, I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure half-court shots are part of his warm-up because that's just the range he has. But it's absolutely absurd. I feel like doing a hook shot is it's the equivalent of like dunking from the free throw line in the middle of the game. Like, it's not something that you should expect to ever see during a basketball game.
So to answer the question, you do think he's an MVP conversation?
In the sense that you do need to have more than one person in the MVP conversation, even though the winner is definitely obvious.
I knew you were going to say that. My only point is I would have a lot of people right now over him only because of the fact that they're 28 and 29 and they're 9th in the West. Now, obviously, that's part of a playing spot. Behind currently the Mavericks at 7th, Grizzlies at 8, and the Spurs are at 10 behind them, just a game back. I can't give the MVP to somebody who's Now, granted, I get his team's injury rattled, and our Warriors fans friends are going to kill us for this, probably, or kill me for this. But
who cares?
28 and 29, like, regardless of Wiseman's injury, I know Clay's out, but if Wiggins is this player that you think is going to help you win the first round playoff series, if I honestly forgot the next best player on their team, Kelly Oubre, maybe Draymond Green, whoever, right? That roster's riddled right now, and he's playing phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but it's just I hope this isn't his final peak. He's on the mid to low end of 30, and I hope that this isn't just going to be the next domino after, like, okay, this is his final hoorah, right? But also, I'm not going to disrespect Harden. By the way, Harden did what he's doing consistently for a couple months in a row, where he ended up averaging almost 36 points a game in a season. So I will give Harden the notch in that regard, but Curry's been playing amazing. I can't discredit anything. It's just his threes he's going to end up completely blowing the 3-point career record. I don't think it's going to even be close, even with the games changing. But we're truly seeing, like you said, the best possible Curry we can, but they just can't string together a couple of wins that are key. And I think it really isn't his fault, obviously. I think it comes down to the guys around him. And yeah, I personally don't have him even at the MVP table. If you want to have a, round table of 4 to 5 guys, I've got a couple of them over him right now. It is what it is. It's the fact that they're not winning.
I would agree I'm not someone who harps on the MVP has to be the best player on the best team kind of sense. I think that's not a great way to look at the MVP conversation, but to be the MVP, you have to substantially contribute to how much your team wins. And so how much your team wins really does end up factoring into the conversation. That being said, Stephen Curry is a automatic Hall of Famer if he retired today. Probably the greatest shooter ever. The end.
2 things. No, probably he is. Ray Allen may have something to say about that, but I think Steph is better ultimately.
Yeah.
The Hawks right now are 31 and 26, and Trae Young is putting up unbelievable numbers at helping that team win after we both wrote them off. I think, I'm not saying he's at the MVP conversation. He's not at my table, but just an intriguing thought to think, they're 4th in the East right now. Get it, a weaker East, right? They're the team right outside the top 3 there. They got ran off the floor the other night by the Celtics, I want to say it was, or the Knicks. Made them look like it was, you could tell the separation in the East. Or the Bucks. I'm sorry, it was the Bucks. Excuse me. But I do have one more question before I get to my second question before I get to my third one here. Is right now, if you had a vote, everything we know about this current season, it comes down to these 2 guys in this scenario. Do you vote for Harden, or do you vote for Steph for MVP right this moment? If the season were to end right now, for what we know about the 2 of them through this season,
Steph, easy.
I'd vote for Harden regardless of all the Houston stuff, just because of the fact that he is literally the reason, with KD and Kyrie being out multiple games and that roster being injury riddled. He's the reason they're 38-19 and one of the best since the All-Star break. I just wanted to see where you were going with that in that regard. I'm curious. My last question for you, and you can answer this honestly, you can digress. I'd like to at least get an answer out of you, because we are going to eventually cover this topic in its ultimate manner. Where do you rank Curry all time right now? Period. Your top 10, period. Your top 10, top 15. I don't want any reason for guys ahead of him or front of him. I just want to know where you have him and why. And we're going to get to our top 10 of all time. Not clickbait. We're going to do that. It's going to happen eventually. We're going to do that, obviously. But where do you have him right this moment? Which, by the way, before you answer, you mentioned the Hall of Fame probability thing about he's 100% Hall of Famer. If he had retired 3 years ago, he's a Hall of Famer. But Basketball Reference has him at 100% probability for Hall of Fame. He's 100% Hall of Famer. Go. I'm curious.
So, to preface, I'm not going to say why people are ahead of him. I'm just going to preface how I determine ranking my greatest players of all time. Looks very heavily on statistically how good they were over a long period of time, and does not factor in how much they changed the game of basketball. Stephen Curry drastically changed the game of basketball. However, I don't think I'd have him in my top 10. Top 15, probably. Top 10, no.
So he's somewhere in that 11 to 15 range.
Mm-hmm.
Right now,
maybe like by the end of his career, maybe he's at 9 or 10 in my mind, but that's probably it.
Right now, he's at 11 for me. That's why I ask. And I won't reveal why ahead of me. And if listeners really want to know, hit us up on Twitter at 2pointers. 2pointers, TWOPOINTERS. I hope I spelled that right.
And I'm sure at some point in the offseason, we will rank our top 10s and give reason why.
And honorable mentions for 11, 12, 13, and 14, and 15, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're moving on to the next part of the segment as news came out yesterday that the NBA decided to fine the San Antonio Spurs $25,000 in accordance with the policy on resting rules for resting players. The San Antonio Spurs were fined the money because they rested DeMar DeRozan, Patty Mills, and Jakob Poeltl, which was against the league's policy that teams should not rest multiple healthy players for the same game. When they do rest healthy players, they're supposed to do it during a home game. So on the road, Spurs violating the policy, they defeated the Phoenix Suns by 26 points while resting players. Yet they were fined $25,000. The Toronto Raptors were also fined this weekend for resting Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam in the same game against the Orlando Magic, which they won by 11 points. It is absolutely ridiculous that the NBA has decided that they are going to mandate who a team should and should not play in a game. The San Antonio Spurs made player decisions that won them the game against the second place team in the Western Conference by 26 points. Why does the NBA front office get to decide who they play for the game? It doesn't make any sense. Or is the NBA front office now going to decide who has to play in every? Do they get to set the starting lineup now? Is that where we're going? They're going to set the starting lineup? You can't get this involved with what teams do on a regular basis. I understand the point of wanting to see star players play, but this is getting ridiculous. If the Spurs won by 26, it obviously wasn't a bad decision to rest those players.
So ultimately, they are obviously fighting for a play-in tournament spot. They are right now the 10th seed in the West. Ironically enough, for the fact that they did it for the first of all, I didn't even know about the home away thing. Period. I didn't know that at all. To be clear to the listeners before I finish my excerpt of this, I don't disagree with them whatsoever, but this is just intriguing. They did this they being the NBA, to be clear, they did this in a way where it's been a rule for what is it, 2 years now, 3 years fully? You cannot do it on an away game because fans are in the seats. They played in Phoenix. I want to say there was 2,200 people in attendance. Now I get it. There's a 10-year-old kid right now, probably wearing a DeMar DeRozan jersey or something, who's a Spurs fan and who was really excited to see him. It's just ridiculous. I don't disagree with you in any way, and this is probably going to be the shortest segment in Two Pointers podcast history. But it is annoying because at the end of the day, it happened. It's going to happen again with the Jazz, who sat Conley, Favors, and Gobert the other night against the Lakers, and they lost in overtime. So the same scenario. They're almost in beating a team that they should have beat regardless of who sat. But it's dumb. I'm not going to be sweet. It's dumb.
With no disrespect to the players that were rested, given the Phoenix Suns are second in the Western Conference, those 2,200 fans were not there to see Jakob Poeltl, Patty Mills, and DeMar DeRozan, quite frankly. They were there to see Devin Booker and Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns.
Period.
I don't see what the issue was with this. And then the Spurs won the game. Like, they made the right decisions clearly by the fact that they won the basketball game. Like, isn't that the whole point of the NBA has made it clear that the point of the resting players is not telling teams that they need to be competitive all the time. It's telling them that you need to market our stars the way we want you to.
My next point, it literally was going to be, it's a money thing. It's a money thing in the way that the NBA is not bankrupt. Don't get me wrong, even after a year like we've had. But they're doing what they can, and they need to try to survive. And this is totally a repercussion of that 2 years ago. No one's hurting for money, like I said, except for some of your small market teams, obviously, and the league executives aren't hurting. Owners, nobody. But this is obviously something that was put in place and why it got that far and why it even got approved, I don't know. But while I don't have anything else to say about it, while we're on the point of the Spurs, I do want to say shout out to LaMarcus Aldridge. Sad note to hear that he obviously retired for some heart issues, but just wanted to give a shout out to, I think, a Hall of Famer for such a class organization. And we hope LaMarcus gets better, and we hope that he can have some form of involvement in the game of basketball, whether it be on TV or whether it be on a coaching staff or however. I just thought that was neat. Lastly, Greg Popovich 100% didn't think twice about doing that, and he wrote the check himself, probably. I don't have everything else.
I don't think that Greg Popovich cares a bit about getting a fine from the NBA.
No.
He cares about the Spurs getting the fine. Let teams rest players when they want to.
It's simple.
Part of the game of having a long season. If you're going to have a 72-game season and a compressed schedule, or have an 82-game season, let the players rest if the teams decide to.
What a perfect fitting transition into comments about the backlash, or comments in regard to the play-in tournament from the NBA's ever so loving poster child right now, Luka Doncic, and their ever so beloved, I think, owner, Mark Cuban. But it's just a funny transition, because my first thing I would say is just in regard to the fact that they are mad about a play-in tournament because of what it does to players playing extra games. So I'm going to tie the two segments together, and I'll let you continue your second rant that I knew you had prepared. The two are tied together, period. Yeah. I'm going to tie the two segments together. I had a mind blank. Sorry.
Before I read off and go on what I'm going to say, I want to remind everyone that basically, if you listen to our podcast, Trevor and I are both very big fans of Luka Doncic and Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks. We both like them. We both hope that they are successful. Now, that being said, in a press conference this week after one of the games, Luka Doncic said, "I don't understand the idea of the play-in. You play 72 games to get in the playoffs, then maybe you lose 2 in a row and you're out of the playoffs. I don't see the point of that." It was followed up by Mark Cuban saying, "The worst part of this approach is that it doubles the stress of the compressed schedule. Rather than playing for a playoff spot and being able to rest players as the standings become clearer, teams have to approach every game as a playoff game to either get into or stay in the top 6, since the consequences, as Luka said, are enormous. So players are playing more games in more minutes in fewer days. In hindsight, this was an enormous mistake." So shout out to Mark Cuban for naming all of the reasons why this was a good idea for the NBA, in that teams now have to be more competitive down the stretch, and provides an actually good incentive to stop teams from resting players instead of fining them, encouraging them to be competitive long term, because the consequences are bigger. Yeah, you would only lose 2 games and be out of the playoffs instead of 4, which honestly isn't that big of a jump at all. But it's actually a good incentive. Teams can make the decisions on when they want to rest players, but they have a competitive backlash from not resting players. You know, the inherent part of the game of basketball, where if you don't play your best players, you might lose the game. And they now have to balance that instead of getting fined for not playing the particular players that the NBA wants them to play. Trevor, thoughts?
And scene. No. To be clear, first of all, Mark Cuban, I love you to death. If for somehow you're listening to this, I know you're on a lot of socials. I know you listen to a lot of podcasts. You had a vote. You chose to vote for this. Yes, you would have been 29-1. I get that. But you have probably the most power, arguably, of any owner. I'm not going to say power. Let me take that back. You probably have the most fair say, opinion, strong opinion, and pull. I guess that's not a good word either. Regardless, you have a lot to say about the NBA, and they listen to your opinion very strongly. You had a vote. You didn't have to vote for this. However, I'm just going to say it because Josh technically beat around the bush, but you're saying it because you're a 7 seed. If you were a 2 seed, or if you were a 14 seed, you wouldn't be saying this, period. At the end of the day, one thing I don't think a lot of people, or the fans that might not be listening every single day to us, or the fans that might not be tuned into the NBA as much as us, or however, what people don't realize is this is a test for future, how the NBA will be shaped. This is a test that, by the way, originally was proposed before a pandemic just showed up on our doorstep and late February, early March of last year, that we were going to do a mid-season as well tournament that's going to matter. This was Adam Silver's one of his biggest things he's done in the last, half a decade or a little bit longer, right? But what I'm getting at is that this is just a test. We need to know if this is going to work. I don't know about you, Josh, but I was really locked into who made the 8 seed last year because I thought the Suns looked really good, winning 5, 6, 7 in a row in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
8
they
in a row.
won all the games in the bubble.
100%. And at the end of the day, it's really good for competition. It's really good for money. And it's really a shame that some of the biggest people are against it. Now, look, they can have their opinion. Don't get me wrong. But this is ultimately going to help the league. I hope it stays. I hope they find a way. I've been struggling with a solution to this midseason thing. Obviously the Champions League type, that's what they're trying to inspire it based off. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I trust them that they're going to do it. I care about the future of the NBA. I care about the past of the NBA. And this is going to matter ultimately when we see how this does. Now, I hope that we have a lot more capacity. We've got about a month to get full capacity in a lot of places, or 50% or whatever, right? But I want to see the full impact financially and on viewership because I think it matters. I think it really does.
Yeah. To sum it up from both segments, my thoughts, teams should be able to rest whoever they want to rest in whatever time period. There should not be a financial fine or penalty or anything of the NBA deciding what player personnel goes on the court to any individual game. The play-in tournament is a good option, I think, for ensuring that teams try to remain competitive late in the season. With the play-in tournament, on the counter side to what Mark Cuban didn't mention, he talks about teams having to continue to play their best players late down the stretch to stay into the playoffs or to not be in that play-in tournament. Teams that, if a team is in 11th place right now, they wouldn't be trying normally. They would be done. They would be checked out, tanking their way to the bottom of the lottery. They can try now because they still have a chance. And you will keep most of your teams being competitive at this point. I just don't see how that's not beneficial for the NBA. And don't get me wrong, I understand players needing to rest. I think that there are other options to this of spacing the season out more, playing a shorter schedule, having a long break midseason to play that midseason tournament that matters, allowing these players to rest if they need to. But this was a good pro-competitive reason for the NBA, and I just don't see how that's a bad idea for the future of the league.
I'm going to share this up as well in my regard to just how I think it all perfectly tied itself together. Very well said on your part, by the way. Ultimately, I'm going to use your Charlotte Hornets as an example because I ever so remember them famously making the 8 seed or 7. I can't remember.
It was always 7.
Ago, when they played the Heat.
That was 6.
That was 6. It mattered to them that they made the playoffs because financially it helped the team, the city, the arena. You've no idea. You obviously do, but people might have no idea, realize like what the financial implications are. I'm going to tie it all back together to money because ultimately the league is a business. Mm-hmm. It matters when these teams, like you said, go from 11 to 10 or now to 10 to 9 to 8 to now you're playing. Yes, you're playing the Lakers or the Jazz or the Suns or the Clippers. You're getting wiped off the floor in 4 games, but we've seen upsets before. It's also fighting for your viability.
But you're getting at least 2 playoff games at home. Which makes for a team in Charlotte or New Orleans or Memphis, I'm naming those 3 because they are the 3 smallest markets in the NBA that need the most financial help. You get a ton of financial help by hosting playoff games.
Right now, you're correct. Right now, it would be in the East, it would be the Heat, the Hornets, the Pacers, the Raptors. I think out of there, the Hornets and the Pacers, could use that the most out of those. And then right now in the West, it's Mavs, Grizzlies, Warriors, Spurs. So really, probably the Grizzlies out of those, like you mentioned, but still just it's simple. Just let's not be a dictatorship, period. It is what it is. How do I carefully, or how do I very happily and lovingly transition to trivia? I feel like we just went super hard, and I feel like now it's just, let's bring it back to earth to something really exciting that's happening in the league right now, and something
hard shift.
Exactly, 100%. That's the energy this podcast brings, man. We bring it. We're real.
Well, we'll just a couple of small news points as we make the transition between talking about the different issues and arguments for resting players. The NBA has now announced that any scout that's been fully vaccinated or any staff member of a team can travel internationally. Important as we move towards the draft schedule, with the NBA draft becoming largely more international because basketball is a booming sport worldwide, which is wonderful to see. And then also a guy that we talked about a ton in the NCAA tournament for basketball, Jalen Suggs, has declared for the NBA draft. We all saw that coming. No shock there. Other Gonzaga news, the number one high school player in the country, Chet Holmgren, committed to Gonzaga today. So Gonzaga train keeps rolling. Shout out to them.
So shout out to you for getting that right. I don't think it was a shock, but I think it was, intriguing that a lot of people thought maybe Indiana. I know Jeff Goodman was tweeting Indiana like 10 minutes before the decision, but who really thought Gonzaga was where he was going? Awesome. Thank you for sprinkling this college basketball, because we're not entirely an NBA podcast. The listeners know that by now. Like I said earlier, transitioning into a really fun and exciting note for the league at this moment. And when I say note or moment, I mean person. Mr. Zion Williamson right now is currently tearing up the league. If you're not watching the Pelicans, you probably don't own League Pass. I'll just be real. But they're putting him on TV as much as they possibly can right now. One of those being, unfortunately, they lost to the Knicks, and every media outlet's going to cover it. He loved playing in the Mecca. I'm not highlighting that whatsoever. I'm highlighting his performance on the court, although he did very clearly say it's his second favorite place to play in the NBA so far. It was the Mecca of basketball. I can vouch for it. It's an awesome place. I'm going to give you 2. If you get this one, I'm just going to give you a bonus point, even though you basically have an opportunity to score 5 points today. For record-wise, could you recap for the listeners the record?
Trevor leads on points 5-3 after last week's NBA draft questions. And as far as getting questions correct, we were both 2-1.
There will be a question
in our complicated scoring system that doesn't matter and doesn't make any sense at all. But we'll keep you updated every week.
100%. I love it. First question is Zion Williamson is currently on pace to be the first player to average 25 points per game or more on 60% shooting from the field. He will be the second player all time to do so. Who is the first?
I'm just going to say what the easiest possible guess to this is and say Wilt Chamberlain.
It is not Wilt Chamberlain.
Dang.
Because he shot so freaking much.
Okay.
That's probably why. I didn't actually look up the stat to back it up. It was Kevin McHale in the 86-87 season. That one was a freebie. If you got it, you were paying attention to the Pelicans game the other day on Sunday on ESPN.
My assumption was Wilt Chamberlain was just making 2-foot shots at the rim every time and shot like 70%. But
Wilt's your cop-out answer. I'm starting to learn.
Well, I'm sorry. The first ever 100-point scorer in NBA history that was way taller than everyone else at the time is my cop-out answer. Dang.
And averaged 50 points per game.
Yeah.
However, Zion Williamson, here's my actual trivia question. I just wanted to do that as a little, little softball, little toss teaser there. It was a hard question. It was a hard question. As of this morning, Zion Williamson has a 27.5 PER. I'm going to repeat that. Mm-hmm. He is a 27.5 PER. For the listeners, here's why that's historic. The only players with a better PER in their first or second season in the NBA were blank, 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 and blank. I'm not going to confuse listeners. There's 4 possible answers. If Josh gets 1, he gets a point.
You said first or second season in the NBA?
First or second in the NBA. There's only 4 people that had a better PER. You need to name at least one of them for 1 point, 2 for 2, etc. There's 4 possible answers. Go.
How many guesses do I get?
You get 4.
I only get 4. Okay.
Yes, because I'm giving you 4 possible points.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's hard. Got to think of someone. So first or second. It's got to be. So somebody had a better PER their rookie year.
There's 4 people that did in totality, first or second. Yes.
Okay. So somebody definitely did their rookie. First guess.
I'll give you a hint.
Yeah.
Give you a hint. One of them is not a big man.
One of them's not good. Cool.
And when I say by big man, I mean power forward or center. One of them is a non-big man. I probably should have saved that hint, but still, one of them is non-big man. I'm being nice.
Okay. So this might seem off the wall as my first guess, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway and
I'm
say
not going to
David
tell
Robinson.
you. I'm not going to tell you right or wrong. Like
Okay,
I'm just going to let you do the 4. So who was that again?
David Robinson.
Okay. Answer number 2.
I'm going to throw Kevin McHale because his numbers were so similar, and think that he probably was probably a very efficient shooter, and that's what player efficiency rating often comes down to. So we'll throw Kevin McHale. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, absolute monster coming out of college, and someone who's not a big man.
I like how
Can
you're
you
doing
tell
this.
me what era that the non-big man played in?
He has played in the last 10 years.
Wow.
He was drafted in the last 10 years. I'm giving you a pretty broad hint there. He was drafted in the last 10 years.
Oh. Well. Okay. I imagine of first and second seasons in the past 10 years, I can't think that one was likely more efficient than Luka Doncic, so I'm just going to say Luka Doncic.
I'm going to go you right now. Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. You almost thought too hard about it. Who was your second guess other than Luka, if you were going to say? Like someone from the current era. Did you have a second guess? I'm just curious.
I hadn't got there yet.
Okay. I'm going to rattle them off. For 1 point, you got Luka correct. Congrats. You keep up with the score and you'll add it up at the end before we close it out. The next person was Shaquille O'Neal.
Did
not get Shaq. Yeah. Did not get Shaq. That was time out, great players out of college and great the first 2 seasons. He's the epitome of that. Your third answer, or the third answer, was Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
There you go.
Shout out to Kareem.
I mean, best college
happy
player
birthday,
ever, so.
Kareem. Happy late birthday, Kareem, the other day. Shout out to the Laker. And lastly, I'm surprised you didn't get this one. David Robinson was 100% off the wall. I think you can guess who it is. It's Wilt Chamberlain. I love trivia. Why did we start doing trivia from day one? This is awesome. I love it.
The time I don't say Wilt Chamberlain.
You gave yourself an alley-oop, and I laughed. I hid behind my microphone for the listeners who can't see this visually. Very soon, hopefully, it will be at least somewhat visual on TikTok. Yeah, so 27.5 PER. Unfortunately, I don't have their PER in front of me. But to recap, Wilt, Kareem, Shaq, and Luka all had 27.5 PER or higher.
I feel like me naming 2 was pretty good. I'm just going to
absolutely for 75 years or 70 some odd years of NBA history. I am impressed. However, the one you didn't get was, I think, the easiest answer, and that was Wilt. That's just funny to me. I mean,
okay, so the reason I said David Robinson, for everybody out there, I shouldn't have said McHale. That was dumb. I was thinking about saying Wilt instead of that. That was stupid. The reason I said Robinson is because I know that David Robinson has the second most efficient season in the history of the NBA, like PER wise. He has the second, like if you look at single season PERs, there's like in the top 10, there's like 6 Michael Jordans, which make up like the top 5. And number 2 is 1 season from David Robinson. And I knew he like became an all-star like in his second year. So my assumption was that.
It's a good guess. His season you're referring to was his MVP season.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope you have some David Robinson trivia for me next week on a very fun topical note.
Where did he play college basketball?
The University of Navy.
I don't think they call it the University of Naval. I think it's just the Naval Academy, but yeah.
The Naval Academy, yeah. Well, fun, yeah. That was a recap for the points, if you must.
Yeah. What are you pointing at me for? Oh, what the score is?
Yeah, the point score, whatever.
So it's 5-5. Did I win or not? I got 2 out of 2. Was that a draw?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. You got it. I'll give you that.
Okay, so I'm 3-1, and it's 5-5 overall.
Yep. Better not bring the heat next week. I'm gonna be really mad. No, I did throw the McHale question out there, by the way, 100% as a bait. I wanted you to take it, and you did. I just thought it was cool. It was just a really neat stat for Zion. But seriously, shout out to Zion.
I'm gonna throw you a tabletop slider next week. Don't worry.
Oh, I'm scared. Here we go.
This
has been fun.
No one here understands what that means.
I don't think I do either.
Okay.
This has been fun. Anything else before we cut it out for the next week?
Do you want me to explain what a tabletop slider is?
I'm going going to have to edit this podcast. So if you do it, it takes too long, I'm editing it out. I'll just be clear.
It's essentially so it's a baseball reference. A slider is a type of pitch that a player throws.
Oh.
And the
Duh.
idea
I
is
knew
that, like, if you're rolling a ball across a table, it rolls and then again it just falls to the floor. And so a tabletop slider or curve ball, that it's also used, tabletop breaking ball, generally the term, it means that the ball is going straight, and then drops just like straight down.
Well, I'm going to leave this loving baseball reference in at the end. Why not? This has been fun. This has been the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Josh. And we will see you soon.